I'll be talking on the current indications and the scope for posterior chamber phakic IOLs. And phakic IOLs have widened the spectrum for refractive correction in the armamentarium of the refractive surgeon, with studies showing in a single large tertiary center offering the various options in refractive surgery. Phakic IOLs comprise around 8.8 to 15% of the total refractive procedures over a 5-year period from 2010 to 2013. The range of correction that is offered today with the phakic IOL, the common ones are the ICL V4C from Star Surgical is around 0.8 to minus 18 diopters of myopic spherical refraction. The positive cylinder of +1 to +6 for toric IOLs and correcting +3 to +10 for hyperopic ICLs. The other common one is the IPCL V2.0 from the CARE group, and from +15 to -30 diopters of spherical and up to -10 diopters of cylinder can be corrected. The selection criteria is age above 21 years up to 45 years, a stable refraction, a clear crystalline lens, and emetropia not appropriate for LASIK. The other features including a mesopic pupil size less than 5, adequate anterior chamber depth, and this will be covered in detail subsequently by Dr. Ramurthy. The preoperative endothelial cell count has to be verified, and important considerations include the white-to-white measurements, SPM, internal anterior chamber depth, mesopic pupil or clear lens, glaucoma screening including the applanation tonometry, gonioscopy, and even a visual fields and an OCT in suspect cases, and a proper peripheral retinal evaluation. Exclusion criteria are cases with compromised corneal endothelium, a shallow anterior chamber, iritis, iris atrophy, rubiosis, cataract, glaucoma, and retinal disorders. Here again, most of the talk will be centered around the latest model of the ICL, that is the V4C. Here, in addition to the V4B, there's an additional central port of 360 microns called as the KS Aqua port. The V4 Evo Plus is the V5 model with a larger optical zone, and no iridotomy is required for these lenses. The IPCL V2.0 has a slight difference in that in addition to the haptic markings and notches which aid the orientation during lens positioning, it also has the upper position holes, and this helps in orientation of the lens. The smart toric design allows 0 to 180 degrees implantation in all cases, so you don't have to worry about axis alignment. So we're talking about the spectrum of correction. We definitely have the first indication having cases of high myopia with beyond laser vision correction and more than 8 diopter sphere with more than 4 diopter cylinder. In these cases, several meta-analyses of randomized controlled trials where 3 RCTs were studied, a total of 228 eyes, indicated that the ICL was a procedure of choice in high myopia, especially with around 4 diopters of astigmatism. These cases were less likely to lose more than or equal to 2 lines of best corrected visual acuity. They scored better on patient satisfaction scores and had a better contrast sensitivity than doing excimer laser for such a large dioptric correction. However, there was a low risk of developing early cataract. Advantages versus refractive lens exchange in high myopia are well established, and currently probably no one does clear lens extraction in high myopia due to the high risk of retinal detachment. Up to 8% incidence of RD has been reported in cases of refractive lens exchange, especially if the axial length is more than 26 millimeters. In addition, the ICL also offers the advantage of no loss of accommodation and is a reversible procedure. However, in high hyperopes with a shallow AC depth, where the ICL may not offer an alternative, clear lens extraction is a viable option. When you're considering low to moderate myopic astigmatism, there are several studies which compare the toric ICL with femtolasic and even the RELEX SMILE group, showing a good quality of vision with better contrast in toric ICL and the RELEX SMILE versus the femtosic and LASIK. But however, in low to moderate myopia, this is a highly debatable topic, and several surgeons would prefer to do an excimer laser procedure which is extraocular and has lesser incidence of complications. The safety aspect of the V4C Vision ICL has been well established, and several studies have shown that there was no visually significant cataracts even up to 5 years of follow-up, a very few anterior subcapsular opacities, and there was just one case of pupillary block in spite of no iridotomy being done. The position of the ICL haptics is very important, and with proper white-to-white measurements and sizing of the ICLs, 6% of cases had a proper location of the haptics in the ciliary sulcus, 70% had 4 haptics located over the ciliary processes, and 24% had either one of the two without any direct lenticular contact of the anterior lens surface. The second indication would be in cases where the numbers don't match up, an inadequate corneal thickness. We're not able to achieve a residual bed thickness of less than 300, a thin cornea, or a percentage of tissue ablated being more than 40%. So although this may be a routine patient walking into a clinic with -9 diopter sphere and 1.5 diopter cylinder, a perfectly normal topography with a width rule astigmatism and a corneal thickness of 517, we have to look into what is the ablation that would be required to correct this high refractive error. And in spite of a thin flap and adequate residual bed thickness, we have to keep into mind the percentage of tissue ablated. Yes, post-classic ectasia has been very well reported, and PTA of more than 40% has been considered as a significant risk factor. So if you actually put that in all our nomograms for refractive correction, even in this case, the left eye PTA would be almost 40%, and hence it would be safer to opt for an ICL in such cases. The third common indication is a group of patients which have suspect topography in a young patient, an irregular topography, or even a keratoconus suspect or a contrast keratoconus. This is a 34-year-old girl who presented with -4.75 diopter sphere and 0.5 diopter cylinder, and just showing how a slight subtle asymmetry in the anterior surface of the cornea along with the posterior float elevation of around plus 32 microns were the only alarming signs. There was absolutely normal corneal thickness, and the Berlin-Ambrosio maps also showed perfectly normal CTSP and PTI progression with a small bump on the anterior and posterior float and a total D value of less than 2.5. However, in these cases, it would be better not to try for a PRK with a high correction and go in for an ICL. Special indications in these cases which are not FDA approved. There's a nice article by Roberto Pineda et al. And this showed cases of stable keratoconus, which will be covered in detail by Dr. Himanshu, post-corneal transplantation, residual ametropia and pseudophakia, post-laser vision correction on bioptics, and the pediatric age group. The press-prioriter correcting PICLs are now have lost interest and no longer being used. With toric implantable Collamer lenses for keratoconus, there are several studies coming up. Although this is not FDA approved, a proper case selection and studying of the quality of vision prior to taking these patients up for ICL is very important. Many of them would complain that the quality of vision with the RGP contact lens would be far superior and preoperative counseling would be required. In the lower picture, you have a patient with a very poor contrast sensitivity and a very large amount of glare and halos. In many cases with decentered cones, you may require to center the cone well with an intact segment and then go in for an ICL implantation, which will give rise to a much better post-operative visual and quality of vision. Post-corneal transplantation, correction of high astigmatism post-DALK has been attempted. You require an adequate endothelial cell count and anterior chamber depth. And laser vision correction, we know in these cases, can be unpredictable and may result in a lot of post-operative haze. However, you have to wait for suture removal and wait for the refraction to be stable. In correction of residual ametropia and pseudophakia, a piggyback implantation of the ICL has been done, and the primary indications include primary hyperopia, symptomatic pseudophakic hyperopia, and symptomatic pseudophakic myopia. Limitations are interlenticular opacities, iris sharpening, and pigment dispersion. This is a case where in a young 3-year-old patient, in spite of the cataract surgery being done, there was a very large residual refractive error of +7 diopter sphere and -1.5 cylinder, where the ICL was, a toric ICL was implanted as a piggyback with a good positioning and vault post-surgery. In bioptics, in many cases after laser vision correction, patient may come with a residual refractive error 5 to 6 years after surgery, and further enhancement may be contraindicated due to a thin residual bed. ICL can sometimes be the primary procedure to debulk the refractive error prior to fine-tuning the excimer when you're going for a very large correction. Phakic IOLs in the pediatric age group have been taken up and the indications are high anisopentropia, myopia or hyperopia non-compliant with conventional treatment, bilateral high emetropia non-compliant with conventional treatment, and secondary high refractive amblyopia associated with neurobehavioral disorders. Although the number of cases are very less, in some case reports may be around 10 cases, the longest follow-up being a 5-year follow-up. In most of these cases, the ICL V4B was used, and very few case reports also coming of the V4C in the pediatric age group. The advantages in taking up early is these are the neuroplastic years and amblyopia is reversible. There's no need of planning a flap procedure because of flap complications may occur. PRK may induce haze when you're going for such a large correction, and postoperative steroids would be much lesser of duration in an ICL. However, things to be kept in mind is the refractive instability in this age group. They're likely to have a progressive myopia. An exaggerated immune response may occur. These cases need to be done under general anesthesia, and follow-up for endothelial cell loss, pigment dispersion, and cataract, and also a change in vaulting with age. Hence, a long-term follow-up is mandatory in these cases. Thank you very much.